Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, my name is Sindy Mindary Fitria with student number 191304210. So here is my interpreting task, and here are the tips working with an interpreter. As an interpreter, we are not translators and not interpreters. Interpreters convey spoken or signed messages from one language into another. And then for the first tip is this: context is everything. This means that we need to brief the interpreter beforehand, and you can say something simple like, I need to get this patient's consent for anesthesia, or I need to explain to my client the details of a plea deal for a day because it would help us a lot to get situated. And then number 2 is provide supporting material. So there are 4 tips that mentioned, which are: the first one is brief the interpreter beforehand. Second, send slides or documents ahead of times. Third, provides names and titles of participants. And the last is into about diagnosis, procedures, crimes, and etc. So this means that when you request the interpreter, make sure you send the interpreter presentation slides and any scripts that will be read. And then number 3 tips is engage with your client. So there are 3 tips that mentioned, which are the first one is talk to them directly, and then number 2, make a contact, and then the last is position yourself adequately. So this means that you should talk directly to them as you would talk to them if you spoke the same language. There's no need to constantly say to the interpreter, can you tell her this or can you tell her that? The number 4 tips is the speed and volume. There are 3 tips that mentioned, which are: the first one is slower is better, and the number 2 is speak loud enough but not shout, and then the last is articulate your words properly. So this means that you should make sure that your volume is adequate. However, there's no need to shout. It means that just a little slower. And then number 5 tips is avoid acronyms, jargon, and idioms. For example, as I read on the video, we need to perform an EMG stat to see why you're getting these Charlie horses. So this means that you must try to be mindful of your vocabulary and avoid acronyms unless you explain at least once what it stands for and avoid using jargon or idioms as much as possible. And then number 6 tips is check for understanding. So there are 3 tips that mentioned, which are: the first one is ask questions, and then number 2, use the teach back method, and the last is do it frequently, not just at the end. So this means that you should make sure the message is getting across clearly. And then number 7 tips is plan your time accordingly. So there are 3 tips that mentioned, which are: the first one, it can take twice as long, and the number 2, keep the schedule time in mind, and the last is check for availability for long calls. This means that everything you say has to be interpreted into another language. And then number 8 tips is don't put us in a tough spot. So there are also 3 tips that mentioned, which are: the first one, we are interpreters, we are bound by ethical principles, and the last is it can be a liability. This means that you should avoid giving the interpreter other tasks, like escorting clients to other areas or giving people rights or things like that. And then number 9 tips is you control the conversation. So this means that as interpreters, we are trained to control the flow of conversation by asking parties to slow down or to speak in shorter phrases, but you can control the conversation too if it's not adequate. And last tips is don't shoot the messenger. So there are 3 tips that mentioned, which are the first one is our job is to convey messages accurately, and then number 2 is we can't guarantee understanding, and the last is we are impartial and biased. So this means that our main job is to interpret messages. So we only interpret the messages, maintaining the same meaning, spirit, tone, and register. That means that there may be times we have to convey the insults or the messages that are not very clear. So we must keep in our mind that it's not our message, we are simply conveying that message. Well, guys, so that's all the 10 tips working with an interpreter. That's all from me. Thank you.